Comrades, revolutionaries, and truth seekers, welcome to another web show. Colonizer's Coffin, giving you blunt discussion, real news, and takes on pop culture, raw history, no chaser. You already know I'm your host, John Tell. Let's go ahead and get into today's pressing issues. I solely want to focus on that today. The attention is on Palestine. All eyes on Palestine right now, as 1.5 million people are forcibly pushed into Rafah, which normally had 200, just a little over 200,000 people, now has 1.5 million crammed in with nowhere to go. And I'll elaborate in time. There's a bunch of things I want to share with you and I want to go through. So I don't want to waste too much time. I just want to go ahead and get into it.
It's incomprehensible that there is a regime that, after the slaughter that it has inflicted on the people of Gaza for 4 months now, has claimed the lives of close to 30,000 people, that has displaced almost 2 million people, that has brought an entire population to the brink of famine, and that is in the dock indicted for genocide, the worst crime a state or human being can commit, that regime is contemplating yet another massacre of the people in Gaza, specifically those in Rafah. More than 1 million people cowering under tents and amid rubble and amid the bodies of the slaughtered and the maimed, and the Israeli regime is planning to do it again. Now I ask you, what kind of regime is capable of that atrocity? What kind of regime thinks it could get away with a genocide in front of the world, and when it is indicted for genocide, want to continue? And the answer, Taoiseach, is a regime for whom there are never any consequences, ever. Words of criticism, even the quite strong language used by Minister Coveney and others today, means nothing, as you rightly said. Means nothing to Netanyahu, to Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, ministers today in the Israeli government saying we want to destroy Gaza, to add to the litany of incitements to genocide made by that government over the last 4 months. Why do they continue? Why do they think they can do it again? Because there are never any consequences, and the United States continues to give them arms and weapons. European states like Germany and Britain continue to give them arms and weapons, and the European Union gives them favoured trade status, and nobody imposes any sanctions on them. One of the proudest things this country can be proud of is what the Dunnes Stores workers did in the mid-1980s by going on strike for 2 years, forcing Ireland to be the first country in the world to impose comprehensive sanctions on apartheid South Africa, which began a domino effect that led to the dismantling of the apartheid regime. Of course, guess who held out till the bitter end to defend that obnoxious regime? The United States and Britain. Same people who are effectively giving the license to Israel to continue its atrocities. Be brave. Do what this country did with apartheid South Africa in the mid-1980s that helped bring that regime down. Admit it is an apartheid state, it is an uncivilized state, it is a barbaric state, and that it should have sanctions imposed on it in order to end that apartheid, end that occupation, and end the possibility of the sort of genocidal slaughter we have seen for the last 4 months.
Thank you, Deputy. Thanks, Deputy. As I said earlier, there is a ceasefire proposal on the table, negotiated by Egypt, by the Qataris, and by the Americans. It is our strong view that Israel and Hamas should both accept that ceasefire proposal. It will allow the killing to stop. It will allow refugees, or at least some of them, to return to their homes. It will allow aid to get in, which is desperately needed by Palestinian civilians. It'll also facilitate the release of over 100 Israeli hostages who've been held for more than 3 months now against their will by Hamas. And I believe that if we can secure that 3-month ceasefire, then there's a real possibility of that becoming permanent. That will, of course, require the removal of Hamas leadership and fighters from that territory. And I echo the comments of Minister Coveney earlier today. I do not believe that you respond to a massacre with more massacres. And I do not believe that you can defeat a monster by behaving like a monster yourself. And we will continue to work with our partners in the European Union and other parts of the world to do what we can do that we believe will be effective. In relation to trade sanctions, you'll be aware that trade's an EU competence. It has been since the European Single Act.
Taoiseach, none of the horror that has happened over the last 4 months would have happened if Western governments, including the European Union and the United States, had not given impunity to Israel for years. Long before the current horrific escalation of violence, Israel was indicted for war crimes and crimes against humanity, for its occupation, for its apartheid, for its ethnic cleansing, going on for decades. The world didn't sanction them. Your government refused even to use the word apartheid, when it is blatant it's an apartheid regime, when it is blatant that the siege of Gaza was collective punishment of 2 million people, when it is blatant that the Israeli government is engaged in an ongoing campaign of ethnic cleansing. Impunity was given, granted, and that has given Netanyahu and the crazed, bloodthirsty ministers that are his lieutenants the confidence to believe that they can continue with this massacre. So I say we have to impose sanctions on this regime and admit it is not a normal state, that it is an apartheid, colonial, brutal regime, and that if we want to see peace as we do, it has to mean the end of that apartheid regime, where there can be equality between Jewish people, Muslim people, Christian people, and people of no religion who can share the land of Palestine as equals. Anything less, which is we wouldn't accept anywhere else, we didn't accept it in South Africa, it has to be imposed by Western governments, and this government cannot simply say, oh, there's nothing we can do, because that impunity is what has given Israel the license to continue with this horror.
In Rwanda, I got 2 gallons of gas in the backseat, finna rid ya, please. I got that zoot suit boot juice, yeah, kill you with a fingernail. There's air raid sirens in residential villages, wholesale slaughter, sons and daughters just because of their parentage, heritage, need a hermitage, pilgrimage, cleanse your sins, you bathed in the blood of innocence, it's a reticence to confess, there is no remembrance for those blood.
Rise against the system, rise and fight for the dreams, the children, the hurt, hunger, lost souls from cancer's addictions, slavery and sins. Fight for the lost friends, fight for the love, the kind that comes from within. The truth won't be lost, I will fight for all are to win.
See, all I want is love, and you want it all the time. Could be our space and envy, I'd surely let you borrow mine. So should we take a gambit, spin 3 sevens in a line, just share our space and envy, I'm sure we'd turn out fine. All you want is love, and you want it all the time. Take my space and envy, don't forget that this one's mine.
Oh shit. Yeah. We were talking about memorizing stuff. I think I do better memorizing things with the aesthetic. Like most of my
bodies double, just remember my name. No war, just genocide. All I know is genocide. All I know is stay alive. All I know is stand and fight. No war, just genocide. All I know is genocide. All I know is stay alive. All I know is stand and fight. No war, just genocide. All I know is genocide. All I know is stay alive. All I know is stand and fight.
Cost him the votes of anti-war Americans this November. Let's get to the bottom line. Poll after poll indicate that the majority of Americans are dissatisfied with the Biden administration's handling of the Israeli scorched earth campaign in Gaza. The International Court of Justice has found that Israel is plausibly committing a genocide in Gaza, but more than 1,000 Palestinians have been killed since that ruling. And the shortage of food, of water, shelter caused by Israel's siege of Gaza is getting worse every day. Many Americans are protesting the administration as it not only staunchly supports the war, but it's supplying the weapons and providing the diplomatic cover for Israel to pursue its plans. Now there's talk of a temporary pause, mediated by the White House, but no permanent ceasefire. So with elections 9 months away, will Biden be punished at the ballot box for his support of Israel's war? Today we're talking with independent presidential candidate Cornel West, one of America's most prominent philosophers and activists for racial, social, and economic justice. Let me just start out, Dr. West. You are running for president of the United States. You have launched a new political party. I'd like to just start out and say, if you were president, you were in the White House, how would you approach the Israel-Palestine crisis right now?
Well, you see, I'm deeply concerned about trying to find a space for morality and spirituality and political courage in a world of overwhelming barbarity and bestiality. And so I'm running to be head of the American empire in order to dismantle the American empire. America should be a dignified and decent nation among nations and not an empire that other nations defer to. So what we have in the Middle East right now, and especially in Gaza, our precious Palestinian brothers and sisters, we've got a level of psychic, spiritual, military, physical violence that is just beyond description. And that's usually the sign of an empire in deep decay and decline and dissolution and disintegration. Because when you get a shift from one imperial center, and once that America's being decentered, you usually get certain forms of intense violence, like the genocide against Jewish brothers and sisters, our precious Jews in 1940, in the early 40s. That was a sign of the decline and decay of the European empire. Then a new era was in the making, and that new era produced the Soviet Empire and the United States Empire. Well, right now, Gaza in many ways is a pivotal moment because it's a sign of the lack of credibility, the lack of legitimacy of a world that's been dominated by the U.S. empire. And I, speaking as one who comes out of the bowels of the American imperial beast, that is to say, black people, like indigenous people, have been the underside of the American empire, deeply committed to morality and spirituality, telling the truth about the American empire and its satellite countries like Israel, keeping track of the crimes against humanity, keeping track of the war crimes, keeping track of the crime of genocide. And so to be in a campaign, which is nothing but a moment in a movement of a people. And keep in mind, my dear brother, 1953, it was black folk who brought the United States to the United Nations and said, we charge genocide. That was the great Paul Robeson. That was the great William Patterson. That was the great W.B. Du Bois. These are towering figures in the history of the American empire, but anti-imperialist, critical of the empire and its various forms of domination and degradation. So for me, it could not but be a choice to be in solidarity with any peoples who have been victimized by the U.S. empire. It could be overthrowing Guatemala, overthrowing Iran, overthrowing Panama. We've got a long history of U.S. imperial interventions in the world, Haiti and so forth and so on, killing Lumumba in the Congo. Well, right now, we have Israel and the United States intertwined in what? An enabling of an execution of the crime of genocide. And so I run as a presidential candidate and being very honest and saying, Joe Biden, you're a war criminal. You are enabling the crime of genocide. Kamala Harris, Lloyd Austin, Blinken, Sullivan, Kirby. I speak to you as American citizen to American citizen, but also as a Jesus-loving, free black man who's trying to find moral and spiritual space in a world of overwhelming bestiality and barbarity. That's what I see in Gaza. So I cannot but raise my voice, but also raise my voice in a context of the transformational forces and tendencies taking place on the globe.
Right.
And of course, we know this is not new.
Right.
We as human beings, we are wretched and a wicked species, organized greed, institutionalized hatred, and forms of indescribable indifference to the suffering of the vulnerable has been part and parcel of our history ever since we emerged from the caves in Africa. But we're also marvelous and we're also a magnificent species. We can fight, we can dream, we can laugh, we can love, we can grin, we can sing, we can organize, we can be in solidarity like what is happening right now in Gaza, and my solidarity with them is forever.
Cornell, I want to play a clip for you of President Biden talking about the $100 billion aid package that he's wanted to direct military support to Ukraine, to Israel, and to Taiwan. Let's listen for a moment.
And when we use the money allocated by Congress, we use it to replenish our own stores, our own stockpiles, with new equipment. Equipment that defends America and is made in America. Patriot missiles for air defense batteries, made in Arizona. Artillery shells manufactured in 12 states across the country, in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, and so much more.
Now, he's talking about the economics of war and the jobs that are connected to the bombs that are going to Israel to drop on Gaza. I mean, your thoughts?
Well, you can just see how morally bankrupt that is. He's trying to appeal to my fellow citizens in terms of their economic interests and not a mumbling word about moral principle or ethical integrity or the damage done to precious human beings in those parts of the world. It's an example of trying to somehow hide and conceal the ugliness, the underside of imperial policy by appealing to people's economic interests at home. We already know them. If we wanted to tell the full story, at this point it's 62 cents for every dollar that goes to the military-industrial complex. The United States has not declared a war based on its Congress since World War II. Every military incursion has been proceeding out of the executive order without congressional approval, and that's been Democrats, Republicans across the board. But that's what empires do, like the Roman Empire, like the Ottoman Empire. We can go on and on. Military overreach abroad, corruption of elites. In America, that's the case of both parties. Citizens feeling desperate, citizens feeling impotent, helpless, hopeless, and usually succumb to some neo-fascist Pied Piper, in this case, the case of Donald Trump, but also feeling as if the only alternative to that neo-fascist Pied Piper is war criminals in the Democratic Party who act as if they want to save the soul of a nation and yet enable genocide, who act as if they want to defend democracy and are anti-democratic within their own party, anti-democratic in terms of those bombs that they sell that are dropped on children. What is it now? 13,000 priceless, precious children, and those Palestinian children have exactly the same value as my child, exactly the same value as white children, or Chinese children, Iranian children, and so forth. That's the end and aim of a freedom-fighting project that tries to provide some moral and spiritual space where political courage can be enacted to raise our voices and we keep track of the indescribable barbarity and bestiality, and that's what we're seeing right on our screens every day. And I thank God for this channel. At least you all continue. You see, in America, the corporate media has turned away from the bestiality and the barbarity. Every once in a while, there's a story now on Gaza as if there's not an ongoing genocide. What kind of a country is America at its worst? An imperial project concerned with narrow economic interests and concerned with geopolitical expansion. What is America at its best? Martin Luther King Jr., Edward Said, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, Dorothy Day, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. We can go on, and I'm trying to make sure that America tries to stay in contact with the best of itself, which is, of course, the best of the human spirit, which is all about love and justice and integrity and honesty and solidarity based on morality and a spirituality that has to do with recognizing that our narrow narcissism, the narrow chauvinism can lead us off the cliff. And that's a long story that goes all the way back. The Hebrew scripture goes all the way back to Egyptian formulations, the Book of the Dead. It goes all the way back to Sophocles and Aeschylus and Aristophanes.
Well, let me ask you something that may be happening in America right now, is that younger voters seem to be tuned into the crisis in Gaza, that their support for the Democratic Party and for Joe Biden has declined. I don't know if they're going to rush to Donald Trump. They may run to a third party, they may run to you, but I'm interested in the fact that they are paying attention, and that there's something going on generationally where young people don't remember the Cold War. They don't remember American empire as you framed it in the same way. And I'm interested in whether your message, you feel it's resonating with them, and do you feel that this is the moment where many of those people are going to reject both of the major parties and go elsewhere?
Oh, I think that's very true, my dear brother. I mean, we shall see, but I do feel that. And as you know, I do 4 or 5 events every day and have done over 500 some interviews, and I can pick up the guys, I can pick up the spirit of the empire and the spirit of the nation. Young people are tired of the lies that hide the crimes. And this is true among our wonderful young Jewish brothers and sisters. Look at If Not Now, Jewish Voices for Peace, and even many Jewish voices beyond those organizations. They're tired of the lies and crimes that have been, the lies told and the crimes hidden. They've been told to them by their parents and their grandparents and so forth. We're seeing this more and more among everyday young Black, brown, indigenous, Asian young people. And so very much like the 1960s, where both in the American empire linked to crimes in Vietnam, people are awakening, but this awakening goes far beyond the narrow talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is part of the right-wing toolkit to attack progressives in the United States. But we're not talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in any narrow sense. We're talking about truth. And the condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. We're talking about justice. And justice is what love looks like in public and what tenderness feels like in private. It is a human affair, much deeper than skin pigmentation, much deeper than religious identity, much deeper than national affiliation. That's why my solidarity with my Palestinian brothers and sisters in Gaza, I do that as a Christian, as a Black man, as a citizen of the U.S. Imperial Republic. Why? Because the humanity always cuts deeper. And I've said on many occasions, if there were a Palestinian occupation or Palestinian crime of genocide against Jews, I would be in solidarity with my Jewish brothers and sisters. It is a moral and spiritual issue, and that's crucial. If Black people were treating white people the way white people have treated Black people, I would be in solidarity with my vanilla brothers and sisters. It's a moral and spiritual issue. Well, right now, who is being subjugated, who's being degraded, whose humanity is being thoroughly called into question, who is being viewed as if they're less than human, treated as non-entities, as if the deaths of all of those precious babies and children and women and men can be just tossed aside, and you get some kind of reflection on narrow economic calculation of a Joe Biden. Please, I have no patience for that. Irene and Clifton West and Shiloh Baptist Church and the Black Panther Party shaped me as a teenager, and I will be true unto death. I'll be faithful unto death, trying to tell the truth and be in deep solidarity with any people who are oppressed, let alone those undergoing such vicious genocidal attack right now.
I want to ask you, Dr. West, about the soul of this nation in a different way. The state of free expression. We just saw the president of Harvard University, where you had a lot of tussles too, in fact, both dealing with Palestine. You, a decade ago, Claudine Gay more recently, but also another dimension, which is about running and giving people options that are, running for office, giving those choices. There are a lot of folks out there trying to stop you from running. And I'm interested in how you see free expression in the soul of the nation from your perspective when it comes to the debates we're having today and the election you are running in.
Yes, well, my dear brother, the anthem of Black people is lift every voice. And it's not lift every echo, but lift every voice. And it reminds you of line 24a of Plato's Apology, where Socrates says, the cause of my unpopularity was parrhesia. Well, what is parrhesia? Plain speech, frank speech, unintimidated speech, fearless speech, speech that is free, that comes from your heart, mind, soul, and body. That's what it is to lift your voice. And of course, you hear it when you listen to an Aretha Franklin, or you listen to a John Coltrane play a saxophone, or you listen to a Mary Lou Williams play her piano, let alone a Duke Ellington or a Count Basie. They're raising their voices. That's freedom at its deepest level. Now, I am a libertarian to the degree to which I have a profound commitment to free speech, even with those with whom I have deep disagreements with. I defend people's right to be wrong in public conversation. That's why I have so many dialogues with right-wing, centrist, liberals, far-right, and of course, left-wing. Because we have to all lift our voices, be able to enter public space without humiliation, and have enough respect that we learn and listen and grapple. Now, there's always operations of power that's structuring the context. But free speech is something that's crucial, and it is under very, very intense attack right now. I was so sorry to see my dear sister Claudine Gay lose her job given the vicious attacks that took place, and it was unfortunate that she was so relatively weak in responding to the question about genocide of Jews. She should have just come right out morally and said, of course, any genocide, no matter who it is, no matter who it is, Tutsi, Armenians, anybody, needs to be called into question. But then the attacks below the belt and the plagiaristic charges and so on. When I was pushed out of Harvard a number of years ago, I was faculty advisor to Palestinian students. I was glad to do it. I would do it again, over and over again. That there was very little support, including even Claudine herself. I called her a number of times and didn't receive a phone call, but I defend her based on principle. But you see, what happens is that once you allow these things to set in place, the attacks on free speech take a number of different forms. And so when you don't defend free speech, then it comes back to your house. And when you're in trouble, you're looking for people to defend you. We have to be morally consistent. We have to have what the great Jane Austen called ethical constancy, where we're there in word and in deed, standing on principle to the best of our ability.
There is a movement right now, I think, in terms of the upcoming election to frame this, that you, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Jill Stein, if you run, you could deliver the presidency to Donald Trump, because Joe Biden does much worse if you're all in that. Is that a fair assessment? Is that something that if you were to run and these other folks were to run and Donald Trump were to come out on top, is that something that you can countenance?
No, I think that's the very narrow, impoverished narrative of corporate media, because they think that that Biden has some kind of ownership over votes that are center and moving toward the liberal and left position. And Trump has some ownership over those on the right. But no, each candidate has to earn their votes. Over 40% of my fellow citizens, nearly 40%, don't vote at all. And so a large portion of the persons who would vote for me have told me I would never vote for Democrats. I would never vote Republicans. In fact, I haven't voted for a long time. Glad you're running, Brother West. You got my vote. Well, that's important. That's important. Why? Because you're reaching out to citizens who have completely given up, who are fatalistic and cynical and almost nihilistic about American politics, and they're giving it another chance. And so the very notion of being cast as a spoiler is part and parcel of the ways in which we have such a truncated narrative in place about American politics. You see, no politician earns any sector of citizenry's vote. You've got to earn it. When people vote for me, they're voting for me. They vote for Biden, they vote for Biden. They vote for Trump, they vote for Trump. Neither one of us own that vote. People are thinking and voting on their own. Now, I'll say this, when it comes to my precious Arab and Muslim brothers and sisters, that the Democratic Party looks upon them as if they're just an interest group, as if they're only concerned with a calculation of their own interests, and they don't understand that you got a Democratic Party going into Muslim communities saying, well, vote for us because of our economic policy, and overlook the fact that we as a Democratic Party have enabled genocide and the killing of your mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers. And you can imagine Muslim brothers and sisters, especially our Palestinians, are saying, do you dehumanize us in that way that we become just a non-entity to be manipulated in regard to your Machiavellian politics? We're talking about our mothers, we're talking about our fathers, we're talking about our aunts, our uncles, we're talking about our mosques, our hospitals, our health systems, we're talking about our schools, we're talking about our civic structure. This is not some electoral political issue. This cuts very, very deep, and that's the way it ought to be, because this is far beyond politics. When you're talking about empires dissolving, when you're talking about crimes of humanity, when you're talking about crimes of genocide being enacted, right back again the issues of morality and spirituality, not narrow issues of Machiavellian politics and these Hobbesian calculations of what kind of interest we have and how does it connect to our interest. That's what the Democratic Party does not understand. That's what the Republican Party does not understand. That's what my candidacy, I think, tries to bring to mind.
Dr. West, if you were speaking now, and you are speaking to some because we're watched there, to both Palestinians in the middle of this crisis and to Israelis watching, what advice and counsel would you give them about their future that they should hear?
I would say first that we must never ever look at a Palestinian community or an Israeli community as monolithic and homogeneous. That you're looking at human beings in both communities. And there are human beings in both of those communities who do understand the viciousness and ugliness of the crime of genocide. And I'm not just talking about the Noam Chomskys in America or the Gideon Levy's in Israel. There's a whole wave of Israelis who understand what the crime of genocide is, and they refuse to deny it. It's not reflected in their government. It's not reflected even in their majority vote of the Knesset. Same is true with Palestinians. When people look at Palestinians, you ought to see a whole plethora of very rich and magnificently creative human beings. You shouldn't look and see Palestine when you look at
Rich foils of plunder and escape reality is few. Prices rise a time or two in the land where Jack once roamed. One didn't have such a dark fate. The heart of the city is where not just leaves but shadows fall. It's also where struggles and battles hold us all. This is about rising up against all odds and mountains around against all despair. This city is a tale of hope's flame ignited in the air.
That's right.
New Jack City is what they call this domain. Reflection ain't nothing but the inner child trying to see you. You gonna look? You gonna pick up that book? Self-reflection. Give me another lesson. growth and strife, line stripes in life mine. Get the high, cause it may only be for this, what they say? Time. Don't forget you have sight, insight. Get high off the truth, seek the root. Feel the flame within you, seek the fruit. Give the boot to the ones licking the boot.
How can I stand out even in a crowded space? A vibrant display of distinctiveness, a unique tale of trace. Reflecting on my identity, my soul starts to understand the allure of this divergence, a unique orchestration.
Is exactly what's going on here.
To the sea! Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free!
But isn't that American dream? That American dream is because there's more people that live that type of fucking American reality. But isn't that American dream? That American dream is because there's more people that live that type of fucking American reality.
Hit the like button, y'all. Share this stream. Follow us on all our platforms. Y'all already know. Before the break, I had a clip of Dr. Cornel West, who's also running for president, as y'all know, or do not know. If you don't know, look him up, what he's about, and find out other reasons as to why he's running other than what we discussed in that piece that I just shared with y'all. And if you want the full episode or interview, go to our YouTube channel, go to the playlist that is titled Web Shows for Content Use, and you can see all of the clips from episodes that we will air. Now, I want to go into some photos and memes and things from the past week concerning stuff that's going on. So estimates, where am I at? Crap. All right. Well, I guess I'll start this way. I wanted to talk real quick about this because I think that it's important to visualize. The area of Rafah is basically the size of Southwest and West Philly. So you've got approximately 1.5 million people that have been wiped out of everywhere else in Gaza, pushed into the size of South, West, and West Philly, right? So now it has undoubtedly become the highest population density currently in the world. We've been seeing that they're closing in and have actually announced that they are going to do a ground invasion. So we already know what's going to happen. Shit's just sickening to me. This photo, as you see, is a girl hanging from a wall with part of her body blown off. She was only 12 years old. It's just one of the 13,000 plus kids. So this is another thing to help you visualize. The Gaza Strip has a population of 2.1 million and is one of the most densely populated areas in the world. Since 2008, Israel has waged 4 wars on the Palestinian territory, killing thousands of people, mostly civilians. So North Gaza has 430,000 people, and that is immediately south to Israel and west of Israel. And then you have Gaza City, which is the largest area. That's 731,000. Then you have Deir Bala, 310,000. Khan Yunis has 426,000, which I believe is the second largest city, which is where they originally told everyone to vacate to. And then they decimated that. So basically everything from 1, 2, 3, 4 is all razed to the ground. There's no infrastructure. There's nothing left there for people to go back to. And is it even safe? Because IOF has infiltrated all of those areas. So what's left is 5. Rafah, with originally 267 people, but you've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 that have all moved to this little area here. All of this and all these people have moved here for the most part. So that's another thing that got me, the fact that there was a propaganda commercial aired during the Super Bowl, and at the same time they carried out an assault on Rafah. Again, a place they told Palestinians to shelter in. I keep going out of this. Give me a second, y'all. Mm-hmm. I really think that Biden is way out of touch here. And as you heard in the interview with Cornel West earlier in the show, it seems to come down to generation as the dividing factor in what information we're actually picking up, what truth we're actually picking up. Again, Israel guided 1.5 million of Palestinians into Rafah. They moved the safe zone further and further south until Rafah was all that was left, and now they're bombing that city. There's nowhere else left to go. The Egyptian border is locked, and there's barely any, as we showed yesterday. The border south of Rafah is filled with humanitarian aid, whether it's food, tents, supplies, things to at least put a band-aid on what is being decimated of the infrastructure. And they're not letting any through. You've got scams going on where people are being charged $10,000 plus to receive medical care in Egypt. And it's a good 250 miles to the nearest center to get that help from Rafah. So even if you do somehow miraculously come up with that $10,000, what if that person that's injured doesn't make it there? Oh, and I did hear something about, I don't have that one, but something about the IOF actually raided a Palestinian bank and stole like tens of millions of dollars. Yep, you read that right. It's 4 days ago. Now this is some shit. The IOF kidnapped the Palestinian, put him in chains, and dressed him to appear like an Israeli soldier, then used him as a human shield while carrying out a military raid in a refugee camp. So this is in the West Bank. So it says UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned of a gigantic tragedy, as we're saying, if IOF carries out its ground invasion of Rafah. 2 days away, the global march for Rafah. There is one going on in DC. for people here in the US. Yes, they do this routinely. I'm sorry, I'm not saying much. I've just been a little rocked by this past 3 days, you know what I mean? And I would have did this episode sooner, but I was beside myself and I had to calm down. I wanted to look up more stuff, which just ended up making me a little more sad rather than angry. And I honestly don't know which one is better. Stand-up comedian Frankie Boyle said, quote, Gaza is the beginning of the end for all of us if we can watch a genocide live streamed during the Super Bowl. There's no challenge in the coming years that we won't fail. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will not stop until he achieves a total victory in Gaza. And the World Court says it is plausible that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza in order the country to prevent and punish genocidal acts. And we know that they just did not listen because we've seen 1,000+ people killed since. Most of the displaced Palestinians forced into Rafah are living in tents and other makeshift shelters that they have bombed, by the way. It's winter and there is little fuel, coupled with the lack of clean water, dropping temperatures. There are already huge outbreaks of disease. Along with that, there's been accounts of people going to the sea and drinking salt water. 97% of Gaza's drinking water was already unfit for human consumption before October 7th due to Israel's blockade that has been going on since, I believe, 07, 08. And so there's not enough clean water for Rafah's swelling population, and already just one toilet for every 480 people. Again, think about this. Imagine if the entire population of Philadelphia was forced into just Southwest and West Philly. Israel having an ad during America's biggest sporting event is insane. If you don't think that's insane, then I don't really know, bud. I don't know. You think big pharma ads constantly are crazy? A foreign government had a propaganda ad allowed to air during our country's biggest sporting event. And they said shit is going to hell in a handbasket. Paying to run a pro-Israel ad endorsing genocide and then launching a massive attack during the Super Bowl while everyone is distracted, and a super secret session to pass more money through Congress. I believe it was $95 billion. Come on. U.S. corporate media is the propaganda arm of the Zionist state, completely owned and operated by Israel. What a disgusting disgrace. And this is referenced, and they said the Nakba is still debated because Left Eye on the News apparently said MSNBC reporter was talking about Rafah and mentions the Nakba, in which Palestinians feel, and this is debated, that they were forced from their homes. This is not debated. It's history. There's documentation of it. There's photos of it. It's in the books. We know that this happened. You can't dispute it. That's like saying the Holocaust didn't happen, and about the Holocaust deniers, but we all know that there's proof that millions of people died. I don't know if you've seen the footage, the imagery from Rafah, but I'm going to see if I still have it up on our Instagram story. These are the tents, photo of tents being bombed, and this is in Rafah the other day. Look at that. Many Gazans in Rafah are posting a farewell that says the next destination of our forceful displacement will be to heaven. Let that sink in.
Isn't a life of passion really what we all want to aspire to have, to live for? Life of passion, life of passion, life of passion. Life of passion, the one that we should all These are the kind of questions that I have. These are the kind of questions that I have. These are the kind of questions that I have. These are the kind of questions that I have.
Deprogramming takes months. Deprogramming takes months.
These are the kind of questions that I have.
Deprogramming takes months.
These are the kind of questions that I have.
Deprogramming takes months.
Ignorance, ignorance, ignorance. Ignorance is bliss. Ignorance.